An intellectual carrot, the mind boggles.
You see? You see? You're stupid minds. Stupid! Stupid!
Earth has had Santa Claus long enough. We will bring him to Mars.
I've been afraid a lot of times in my life, but I didn't know the real meaning of fear until I had kissed Becky.
One thing will be clear. It's not for man to interfere in the ways of God.
It's alive. Oh, it's alive. It's alive. It's alive.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Earth vs. Soup, episode 161. I'm Aaron Pollier.
And I'm Darlene.
We came across a movie, just in me kind of randomly searching for different movies that we haven't done.
We started watching it on one.
And we ended up watching it on YouTube. So this is available on YouTube and in the best quality. We were watching it on Tubi, but it was a pretty poor version of it. It was blurry and really kind of... I don't know. It was faded. That's what the best way I can describe it. Anyway, this is Horror Express from 1972. I thought this was going to be a Hammer horror film because of the two stars. This stars Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing. And I'm like, oh, it has to be a Hammer horror. It's not. This is a Spanish
film.
It's a Spanish film.
Spanish and UK.
Yeah, and it turns out that they obviously, well, not obviously, but a lot of these films, when they're shot on tiny little sets, they don't really record the sound. It's all put in and dubbed over later on. And so Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee came back to do their own voices. And we actually get the voice of a person that I've talked about before. He's very rarely in things, but I love it when I either hear him or see him, and it's Roger Delgado actually has his voice in this as like one of the inspectors, and Roger Delgado played the Master during the third Doctor's era of Doctor Who, and Roger Delgado is a charming man. He is a guy that has a voice. Obviously, he's long dead now, but he has a voice that is very recognizable, at least to me. And a story with Roger Delgado, I know I'm getting away from the talking about this movie, is that during high school, my it was one class, I forget what it was an English class, I think, and the teacher put in an old Betamax film into the VCR, and I think it was something to do with like Shakespeare and touring his old home. And my buddy and I are in this class, and all of a sudden on the screen jumps up Roger Delgado. And he's like, I'm your host for this tour of like Stratford upon Avon. And my buddy and I, we turn to each other and go, my God, it's Roger effing Delgado. And he still had his beard. He was like, it looked like he had come off the set of Doctor Who and as the Master and was still just doing his
goatee,
bit. Yeah. He's a charming, you have to admit he's a charming man, right?
Yes.
Okay, but we only hear his voice in this. I apologize. So anyway, it's not a Hammer horror film. And there is a suggestion that the sets were reused from Dr. Zhivago. I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, that's something I was looking up. The interesting part is you will have two different years that it was released.
Yes.
And that's because September 30th in 1972, it was... released on the European International Special Films thing.
Okay.
In Spain. And it went in November 30th, a whole year and a few months later in New York.
Okay. So that was a long release. But since it was like a Spanish filmmaker, maybe it was just... difficult to find distributors in the US. I don't know. One of the things that we should talk about as well before we get into the plot is that this was not soon after, but it was fairly soon after the death of Peter Cushing's wife. And a lot of the behind the scenes stories revolve around how Peter Cushing came onto the set and almost walked back off because he didn't think he was ready. He didn't think he was ready to act. He had truly loved his wife. and he had like just crying on set. And Christopher Lee, who was very good friends with him, consoled him and talked him into staying by recounting stories to him about all their previous fun that they've had together filming movies. And finally, one of the things I read was Peter Cushing had night terrors at night while filming this movie because he had been so used to having his wife there, I guess, and he would just wake up screaming, that his close friend Christopher Lee decided to sleep in the same bed as him to make sure that he was okay. They really cared about each other. This was not like a weird relationship. They just cared about each other. They had known each other for decades. They had worked together. They had grown close through all their working. And obviously this man, Peter Cushing, was grieving, badly grieving. And it's really nice that Christopher Lee was there for him at this time. And it probably allowed Peter Cushing to get back into acting for as long as he did. Now, remember, one of his last films was Star Wars as Grand Moff Tarkin, but he didn't act much longer than that. I forget what year he died in, but he still had about another 7 or 8 years after this that he was working. So anyway,
the next thing I need to say is 90 minutes long, and it had a small budget of
$300,000, and in today's money, I have no idea how much that is.
And this is in 72, so that's a figure we see in the 40s and
for high-end Universal films, yeah, or like high-end ones. So I mean, this is a fairly low budget with two big named actors in it, and that does tend to suggest that these sets were reused from somewhere.
Yeah, because those sets they're amazing.
Gorgeous. Yeah, this movie punches way above its weight, I think. And it's going to be fairly clear while we talk about this movie, even though it does have its problems, every movie does. I think we're both going to recommend it.
And the train model is wonderful.
Yeah, they actually, there is model work in this movie, and they didn't need to have it. That's the thing. They didn't need to have model work in this. They could have literally just gone out at night and shot a passenger train going by, like somewhere in Europe. Hey, we're gonna film a passenger train going by, and blur out the engine so it's not really that detailed and you can't tell the exact type of engine or the carriages. It's like, oh, it's hidden in smoke and mist or whatever, and it would have worked fine. But they decided they were going to go the route of actual model work and making an appropriate model train and carriages. And wow, right?
Yes. And you said the first part of the movie takes place in the mountains right out of Madrid. And most of the filming was done in Madrid. That station where we start in is actually a station in Madrid.
That's what I read, that they filmed it in a station in Madrid, because there is a listed filming location as a station like that. Now, the movie, we can get into the plot, but the movie starts with this idea that we have an expedition in the mountains somewhere in China.
Mongolia, I thought.
Mongolia or China. It's somewhere there. It's not very specific. And it is 1906. And there is a Royal Geological Society expedition I wrote down, they specifically said Manchuria.
Oh, Manchuria. Okay.
So the expedition ends in catastrophe because we have Christopher Lee finding what looks to be a fossilized corpse. Well, not a fossilized, I should say a preserved corpse. He calls it a fossil all the way through the movie. It is not. It's a humanoid corpse. It has ice crystals all over it. It looks like it's just...
I thought it was just crystals because he actually touched it and moved it.
Yeah, it could be. Later on in the film, there's still crystals on him, even though he's been like outside for a while and doesn't look like it's freezing temperatures. So it's possible they're rock crystals. He also says that it's like 2 million years old. I don't know how much of that I'm supposed to take as gospel truth. I don't know.
We'll never will.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter. Anyway, they remove this corpse, place it in a crate for delivery. Well, they're going to ship it on the Orient Express, which is on the Trans-Siberian Railway. Okay, now
no, the Oriental Express goes from Europe to Turkey, so you're dealing with the Trans-Siberian Railroad.
yeah,
And it's supposed to go from Shanghai to Moscow, but all I found out was that the with connections, the connections would go to Beijing.
well, yeah, they specifically mentioned leaving Shanghai.
Yes.
But again, it could just be connections that they're like going from rail line to rail line to get to where they're going. Yeah, like the main Trans-Siberian spur at that point, going to Beijing or whatever. Uh, sure, why not? There's a spur that goes off to Shanghai. I guess it doesn't really matter.
So two old friends find each other. Professor Sir Saxton, which
Christopher Lee. That's Christopher Lee.
Is having trouble getting his ticket, even though it was
supposedly paid for already.
And 3 weeks or 3 months, something they'll deal with 3 there.
And this guy, and here's what's interesting. This is starting to verge into our other hobbies a little bit, this movie. And it's because there are Russian Imperial guards all the way through this. There's Russian Imperial personnel through this. And there are certain things where it's very clear that they did their research. And, okay, that uniform, it's not perfect. It's not even very accurate. But from a cursory, just glance, you're like, okay, that looks right. That if I wasn't like a person that actually kind of knew what I was looking for, that would look fine as like a Russian Imperial soldier.
But then again, we deal with the World War II.
Yeah, but there's bleed over,
and we have an issue where everybody asks us why our uniforms aren't so uniform.
It's because there weren't uniforms in the Soviet Army of World War II, but in the Imperial Army, there was a bit more. But remember, a lot of these people weren't Imperial soldiers; they were like police or military police. Let's
I would say that it would probably be like our Civil War. Those uniforms were created by the person.
Yeah, well,
so it's probably that. So you would still have the same problem as World War II, where a dye from one is a different than another.
So there's this idea that what I'm trying to get at is there's things that we see in this movie that I was like, okay, people did their research. It's a Spanish film, so it would have, if it was like an Eastern European film, we would have likely actually had very accurate stuff. But as a Spanish film, what we ended up getting was, with everything that's Russian Imperial, retooled either Spanish equipment or stuff that was left over from the Spanish Civil War prior to World War II, when the Soviets were putting things into Spain.
Put the Mosins.
Yeah, because like in the when we were originally watching it.
Can I finish my
go
statement?
ahead.
They put the Mosin bayonet on these.
Yeah, there's Mosin bayonets on Spanish Mausers, and when we were watching the Tubi version, it was blurry and low resolution enough that I was like, are those legit Mosin Nagants? I can't really tell because it's not lit properly. And it's low resolution, but the bayonets look right. Now, when we get to the YouTube high quality version, that we stopped Tubi and we started, okay,
at the time that somebody was stealing something out of a safe and has a writing on the label.
Yeah.
And you couldn't read it in the
Tubi version, but you could on YouTube.
You could on the YouTube.
But anyway, once we get to YouTube, we can tell that they were Spanish Mausers.
It was a difference of like, maybe that one was the original filming and the other one was a DVD Blu-ray
remaster or something like that.
Master.
Yeah,
and it makes it just absolutely wonderful.
The colors, the detail. But anyway, there's all these little details of Russian Imperial / Soviet stuff that if you aren't a person that, like, little things pop out at you as being wrong because of like your hobby, you're fine. Like, I like the fact that there's semaphores on the train. Like,
Yes,
somebody cared about
huge semaphore.
and we're like, oh, that's really cool. All right, awesome. And that they actually had like Eastern Orthodox icons that were in that one train cabin.
And they did have the belly stoves.
Yeah, the belly stoves.
Pot belly stoves.
Yeah.
Because they would be on trains to keep it warm at that time in 1906.
So I diverted into this talk because Christopher Lee's character is trying to get on board, and it's just that this guy in this Imperial kind of train master's uniform is just like, screw you, and he's basically looking for a bribe.
Yes, that was something that was more so in India, as I understood.
I don't know.
But everything had to go through a lot of bribes. And what happens with is that
Peter Cushing's character comes in.
Dr. Wells, his friend, who he knows, they even actually have a discussion that makes you know that they were friends.
Yeah.
Comes in with a young lady.
Yeah, that's Natasha.
And he gets his ticket. Natasha doesn't even have a ticket.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why you end up with 3 people in that cabin.
Which I thought would have been a bigger part of the movie, because that would have been fun. But it doesn't really apply later on. Anyway, Natasha gets on, and Dr. Saxton, Christopher Lee, looks really pissed off. Really pissed off. And he has all these boxes with this corpse basically in them out on the train platform. And finally this cop comes in and says, there's all these people gathered around a body out by your boxes, doctor. What the hell's going on? I didn't think a friend of the general would have this kind of issue. The general promised that this was all...
Right before he walks in, Peter, the Saxton character, clears off the guy's desk by just shoving everything off.
He was pissed off.
He was really...
But the cop comes in. Yeah, that was funny, right? Because he was like glaring him down. Christopher Lee's a big dude anyway. He's like glaring this guy down, and this guy isn't budging at all. And this cop comes in and says, I thought a friend of the general would be like a little more considerate to X, Y, and Z. And this guy's like, oh, you're a friend of the general? Here's your ticket. Like, done.
Here it is.
And he's like falling all over himself to like not get it.
He really wasn't trying to give that ticket because it's the B of the A of Wells.
Well, I don't think that's the case. I think that was him just giving that ticket. I'm sure that there was another cabin on board that he could have. But anyway, there is a body outside, and the corpse is like white-eyed under a tarp.
And that was an interesting little thing, because you were like, what is this guy doing? And you find out in the next conversation, which you're going to talk about, that he's a notorious thief that can crack anything. And they go, well, he's blind. A thief that is blind?
Mm-hmm.
And because his eyes are whited over.
And there's blood pouring out of him.
And he's like, he every time he sees a cop, he's gone.
Yeah. So
he can see perfectly fine.
They're like, okay, fine, whatever. There's a priest who's I don't know what's his name. I always just called him the priest or father. It's Father Pujardov. Okay. He's a Rasputin-like character, dressed all in black. He's a monk. He's crazy hair. He's Rasputin. He's a Rasputin-ish character.
Whoever gave him the directions, he said, probably you need to act like Rasputin, and this guy did it.
Yeah, but with a lot less hedonism.
Yeah.
Because Rasputin was known for his hedonism. If people don't know about the Mad Monk Rasputin, please, feel free to look him up. He's actually kind of fascinating how he wormed his way into the royal family of the Imperial Russian royal family. But Rasputin-like character, and he's claiming that there's evil inside this crate because a cross can't be drawn on the tarp that's surrounding the crate.
He writes on the ground an X.
Well, it's a cross.
And then he couldn't make the cross on the...
And everyone's like, oh, That's just chicanery.
Shenanigan.
That's chicanery. That's whatever. There's a little bit of early 70s dismissal of New Age type stuff for good reason, but it comes across as mean-spirited in this more than anything. Like, he's just, people can hypnotize themselves into thinking whatever. There's no rationality behind X, Y, or Z. And I'm like, okay, you're right, but you're being really shitty about it. That's the difference here. Like, but is Christopher Lee's character really justified in all that in the end? Yeah, I guess he is, because it is all still chicanery and nonsense. Anyway, all the boxes get loaded onto the train. We hear a growl from inside the crate. Dr. Saxon, Christopher Lee, checks on the box. There's nothing wrong, seemingly. Okay,
And that's where he pulls out the crystal. And why I said that I thought it was crystal.
like rock crystal.
Rock crystal.
Okay.
Or salt crystal, big chunks of salt crystal.
Either way, this corpse is supposed to be fossilized. Okay. We're introduced to another character, Countess Petrovska.
And her little dog.
Her little tiny, like, fluffy dog. She's
Poodle.
married
Toy
to
poodle.
Count Petrovski, who is a Polish count.
Yes, Polish.
Okay. So they're going somewhere, and there's some, like, good-natured ribbing about how the British and the Poles didn't get along in the 1500s. There's some good-natured ribbing about it, and I'm like, okay, that's cute, I guess, because
She's American now.
no,
That's what she said to the
no, there's
Rasputin.
there is a different character who is American.
Oh,
She's Russian. Yeah, you're looking at your notes. She's Russian. She's Irina Petrovska, and the one woman who is like, oh, I'm an American, you can't screw with me, is Miss Bennett. Her name is.
yes, and I thought it was a guy at first.
Are you talking about the old woman who's a different character completely?
Wells.
That's Miss Jones.
Oh, Miss Jones, I thought was when they walked
Because she's
up,
dressed in like a suit and tie
yeah, and looks
and
like
has short hair.
no, it's in a bun.
It's in a
Actually,
bun.
you see it in a
Okay.
bun.
She's actually an important character.
Yes,
yeah.
she's a doctor's assistant.
Yeah, and she's
there's
actually very skilled. So anyway, we're introduced to this countess. Her dog is terrified of whatever's inside of the crate. So we end up
And she gives her jewelry to be put in the safe.
by the baggage man.
Yes,
Now, the
a
bag-
bag of what I thought was
Gems.
jewels, but it turns out to be some kind of special steel.
Yeah, we thought it was like gemstones, but it turns out we find out later on that it is a special steel developed in Poland that is as durable, well, as hard as diamond. Like, it can't even be scratched by diamond. Okay, now that's a minor plot point that didn't even need to be in the film.
No,
It didn't even need to be here. That's an interesting plot that could have been its own movie, in fact. Because there's like a spy plot that's put on top of this.
and that's
that
why
involves that.
that's why Natasha is there.
Yeah, Natasha's a spy who is trying to get this steel for Russia. And I can say Russia because this is pre-Soviet Union.
Imperial Russia.
It's Imperial Russia. She's trying to get it for Imperial Russia. And I thought, okay, this would be a good plot. You're on the Trans-Siberian Railway. There's the super steel, and you have a spy there trying to steal it and get off the train undetected. But like the whole train's filled with spies. Like, yeah, sure, do Murder on the Orient Express where everyone's guilty. Like, everyone's a spy trying to get a hold of this, and everyone's stealing it from each other. And it's not. I'm not saying like make it a slapstick. It sounds like it's funny, but it's more of like these are spies all trying to outdo each other and keep alive while trying to play the game that I'm not a spy. That would be a fun movie to watch, like an Ocean's 11 kind of amusing film. Yes, I'm making movies out of this movie, but to put it,
This movie
simply,
is good. I will recommend it.
oh yeah, we're not bitching about this movie. This
It's-
movie is good, actually. There's a lot of stuff going on in it.
But I like that they gave that little thing.
Yeah,
And you're going, well, there is no such thing as we have titanium steel. but it's
Yeah, but
not
it's-
titanium steel.
No, because a
'cause
diamond can't even scratch it. And I
So-
guess this is supposed to like be saying, oh, whoever has this steel, is going to rule the world in the end because they're going to be able to build.
But obviously, it gets destroyed at the end.
It gets lost at the end. Let's put it that way. So anyway, moving on, we end up having the baggage man drilling a hole into the crate to see what's inside because Dr. Wells, Peter Cushing, asked him to because he's curious about what's in there. He sees what's in there. The creature wakes up, has glowing red eyes, and melts the baggage man's head. Okay, so now we're going to go through a whole bunch of scenes here because I'm not going to like ruin some of the nice little scenes. The point is that there's autopsies done. We learned that this creature, when his eyes glow red, it basically boils the person alive from the inside out. So it's kind of like
and their brain
microwaves.
becomes smooth.
Yeah, their brain becomes smooth. There's no folds in the gray matter. So their eyes boil. That's why they turn white. Blood pours out of them. And then we learn later when the creature is seemingly killed, that they take its eye out, that its eye fluid contains its memories. Like its memories are located inside its eye. All right. So when they put like this eye fluid on under a microscope, they can actually see scenes of the past of Earth.
Dinosaurs, which we laughed at.
We laughed at because they were clearly like drawings of dinosaurs, the good drawings of dinosaurs, but filtered through like a liquid. But then we're like, okay, yeah, this is science fiction. And then it went, okay, this is science fiction. So you have like the memories of this creature in the eye fluid, and then all of a sudden they're like, wow, that's Earth from space. And they're like, so it's not from Earth? Oh, okay. And like all like Wells and Saxon are like, okay, well, we really need to capture this creature, don't we? And yes.
Well, no, the eye gets stolen.
I get stolen by the Mad Monk.
Yep.
And he's like, Satan, I will serve you. I will serve you, Satan. Use me. And so when the creature is actually
that's
killed,
the monk.
Yeah, that's the monk.
So he's not very religious.
No, he's not very religious. So when the creature actually gets like gunned down, and I thought, okay, well, this creature could like survive being a fossil for 2 million years or whatever. What would bullets do to him, really? But anyway, he does die, and he like transfers his memory into the monk, and the monk is now like this monster.
After being in the Inspector.
Yes, because he was in the Inspector as well. He gets transferred into the Inspector, and the Inspector is murdering people at times during this film. There's lots of murders that occur.
There's the whole cabin of murdering Cossacks.
Well, that comes in later, okay, because everyone is basically told we have to stay on the train because there's all these murders, and they are able to communicate off the train. So they end up stopping very briefly at this outpost. And this outpost has a couple like train station dudes that get this telegraph. And we're introduced to the last character that comes into this situation. And he's played by Tony Savalas, of all people. Like, he's not even really listed in the credits, even on Internet Movie Database, like towards the top at all. He's not even really listed out there.
Yes, but the pictures always show him.
The pictures of this movie always show him, and he's a Cossack and has this like band of Cossacks, and he's what is his name? General Kazan, Captain Kazan, and here's the thing, he has like a Cossack dagger that I was like, okay, I get it. His costume is amazing. It's this bright red coat that has yellow banding
that he doesn't have it actually pinned together. Because you see a bit of his chest. And
he doesn't care.
When he gets the telegraph, he's in with two women
in a jail cell.
He's
just like sleeping with these women in front of like these two older train station operator guys and he does not give a shit. He's beyond all of this. He's a Cossack. I report to the royal family. I do what the hell I want to. And you know what? There's been murders on this train. I'll find the murderer. And his basic investigative technique is murder everyone, terrorize everyone, murder everyone, and then you know what? The murderer is taken care of.
Let God sort him out.
Let God sort him out. But his costume's fantastic. Did you notice that the yellow banding that he has on it has Russian Imperial eagles all the way down it?
Like your belt?
My belt.
General belt?
My general belt doesn't have Imperial eagles on it.
Oh.
That has a hammer and sickle on it, Darlene. I have stuff that does have Imperial eagles on it, like our tax stamps on our semaphore. But anyway, his costume is fantastic, and he's a charmer because it's Tony Savalas. He actually is kind of a charming guy, but he comes in and everyone's terrified of him. Oh my God, there's Cossacks on board, and they have their Cossack hats and they draw their swords and they have all those Spanish freaking
and then they end up being dead in one of the train cars. Just layers,
layer of them down, because the monster comes out and they all end up opening fire on the monster. And it doesn't
after
care.
That is when
it gets crazy,
when the monk actually gets the spirit, the energy, extraterrestrial.
That's when he gets the energy, and then the monk basically comes out and kills them all with his glowing red eyes. All right, so this is bad. This is really, really bad. We end up having the two doctors going, okay, well, we need to get everybody into the furthest train car, which is the furthest back, because the Mad Monk and all the Cossacks are towards the engine.
The Cossacks were going to hold them off as they got the people to the back.
Look, I don't think the Cossacks cared. They were just going to murder everybody anyway. But they were like, we need to take care of the bigger threat.
That's what Sir Saxton and Wells was trying to do, is push everybody else out. But there is was it Saxton that went forward to try to get the Countess and the Count,
and that's where
that's in the
and the Count gets killed, but we learn from the monk now monologuing as the creature that he actually came from a different galaxy and has been here for millions of years, suffering through the history of this planet, through like the extinction of the dinosaurs. And he's like, you don't want to kill me. You don't.
I have all this medical knowledge.
I can cure all this disease. I have all this knowledge. I never forget anything. And I can transfer my mind. I can prevent death. And he's like, watch, I will prevent death. And he like raises his arms, and all of the dead all over the freaking train start rising. And I'm like, oh crap. Now this has suddenly become a zombie movie? And it's actually a bit terrifying because yes, they are dead. They can be killed with enough damage, but they're like screaming and attacking people, and they're using weapons. And it's like, okay, this has just gone from like, the threat is pretty big because this guy can just look at you and kill you. Now it's this guy can look at you and kill you, and he has an army of the undead.
So Saxon rescues the Countess.
And they run their little butts
through the gauntlet of zombies.
And they make it back to the back car, and they're like, decouple the train.
Well, Wells was already starting to do that.
Yeah, he's like, screw this, I'm just going to get us away, which is smart move. But we also learned that the government has signaled the next station to basically say, if the train doesn't stop, you have to stop them, because we're not going to let this continue. This is insanity. And the guys are like, do you know what that means? Yeah, that everyone is going to die on that train. So like the guys go out and switch the tracks to this like turnoff, but this turnoff goes right to a cliff. And in the end, what happens is that the engine is still going full bore.
The monk is actually in the engine room.
And he's unable to stop the train, and the entire train flies off the cliff in a Back to the Future 3-esque like disaster sequence at the end. And except for the last car that does get decoupled, and it drifts to a stop right at the edge of the cliff, where the rest of the passengers are still alive. Drama. That's the end of the film. Now, I assume that all of those... Yeah, Finn. I assume that all of those characters are somewhere in a gulag after this movie, like being questioned about what the hell happened, and are likely never seen again, because there's going to be too many questions about what happened. Let's put it that way. This movie has events, right? Like there's events in this movie, and it seems like it's kind of starting off a little low key. Okay, it's going to be It's going to be like a murder
They
mystery.
even mentioned that if this is the case, that it grabs the memories of these people. It's got a thief.
Mhm.
It's got a porter. It's got a. This was after Natasha gets killed as she's trying to steal the steel.
Mhm.
Steal the steel.
Mhm.
That's where you find out she's a spy.
Mhm.
Because they've mentioned who it killed and was just absorbing their memories. So that is creepy on itself. You know, we've had this in science fiction where, in books that I've read, where there's this alien that can just make you dumb.
Sure. I think there's a really good line. I was trying to find it again, but maybe I'm misremembering it. It's like one of the women is screaming when the Cossacks come on board. You know, yeah. When the authorities learn about this, you'll be sent to Siberia, and I think it was Captain Kazan that says, "Lady, I'm already in Siberia."
It was the Count or something
Yes.
that says the Countess. It was a female that was.
Wasn't it the American? You'll find yourself in Siberia, lady. I'm already in Siberia. And I thought that was really funny because this Tony Savalas could not give a shit, and it's clear that he's a corrupt, evil man in this, but he actually comes across as, I don't want to say funny, but he's amusing to watch because you know that this is no good. Like no good can come of the situation, and then Tony Savalas comes.
And you're like wondering what it. You know, he's very much the Imperial.
Like he's an Imperial loyalist, yeah.
Yeah, he's very much an Imperial loyalist. But what the hell did he do to get sent to Siberia?
He can have all the loose women he wants to sleep with in train stations.
He had to have slept with somebody that he shouldn't have.
Yeah, I mean, he does.
That's
not
what it comes
care.
off
as.
as.
It's fantastic. But I love the Cossacks' hats in this. Anyway, what works? What works? The costumes.
The sets. But let's talk about all the costumes. Because, I mean, obviously we've already talked about Tony Savalas' costume. Fantastic. I like the details. The play that is going on between Wells and...
Let's talk about the costumes first. One at a time.
You've already talked about the costumes.
What other costumes work, Darlene? Because I can think of four separate costumes you specifically mentioned while watching that you loved.
I like that there's the the Asian, well, I should say Imperial Chinese outfits.
That's on some of the characters, yeah.
What's really interesting about this whole thing of this is there's
Asian people on the train.
Yeah, some of them are in their
we'll say 1970s imagined cultural things, because we can't say they're accurate. They're not. What was with that Imperial Chinese woman that had all the funky hair and that? I don't know. It was just a character in the background. That's fine. She's riding the train. Just going to Moscow. I don't know. Like, I like that there were interesting costumes on background characters and even on the main characters, like the smoking jacket that Peter Cushing is wearing throughout it. I'm like, that is an amazing smoking jacket. Like the detail on that.
The detail, you have to be watching the better quality one.
The Countess's dresses that she wears.
Natasha's
silk dress that she had, like the shiny silk. That was really, I mean, all the costumes are really well done in this.
Vibrant.
And an attempt towards accuracy for uniforms was made. An attempt. I won't say they succeeded, but an attempt.
It is a very diverse.
The main cast are all Caucasian, but
it's very diverse.
The background characters are all there. Yeah. So the sets are fantastic. Every train car looks different. Now, mind you, they just used the same train car. They just redressed it. So they would shoot all the scenes that were supposed to be in one train car, then they tore it down, rebuilt it.
I don't know about the one that was the Count's one, because it really looked like it was two.
Supposedly it was one train car, and they just took out the walls.
Oh.
One train car. But all of the sets look good. Like the detailing on it.
They made you feel like when you were in those cabins that it was very much a very confined space. The hallways made you feel like it was very confined space.
Mhm.
The people had to walk sideways down these hallways.
Yeah.
And that would actually be what it is.
It looked proper. Yeah, it looked fine. So, okay, what else worked? Costumes, plot, not the plot, costume sets. The plot's fine. I don't know if I want to say it works. It works. Like, it doesn't, when I think of
It carried right.
It carried well. It made me, I enjoy the plot.
I really get upset with, like, that one that I say is the train wrecks. The ones that seem like it just like jars from place to place. I don't like those because and this one just moved.
I can't say that the acting was bad, but I don't think it rises into the category of good, even though I love Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee.
I think they worked well together.
They
Some
worked
of them
very well together.
The characters actually, for strangers, well, most of them being strangers.
Yeah, they worked well.
They
together.
worked well.
But
and
I'm
you
saying
did
like their
have
acting didn't rise up to the level of being incredibly memorable.
No, but you could see that
fine.
there was they were really trying to feel like they were Dr. Wells and Sir Saxton. They were really trying to show that they were acquaintances, not really friends.
Yeah.
Like acquaintances.
Because they were good friends off camera.
So that was, you see that distance, but still the known.
So the model works.
The model really works well.
Because you can tell it's a model. But there's like one shot that I actually questioned it for a moment. I was like, is that yeah, it has to be a model, because you looked at the smoke coming out of the smokestack, and then you're like, okay, yep, I can tell that is a model, but it's like a 1:12 scale. Like, it's a large model. It's just that it still was a model. It looked good, though.
The snow scenes that they had, the train going down,
yeah,
was really good.
Yeah, really good. Good model work. Really, really good model work. Can we think of anything else that rises up?
I love the
that?
telegraph, that ticker tape.
The ticker tape telegraph, yeah.
It really was beautiful.
Yeah. So what
so
doesn't
small
work?
Distance.
What doesn't work?
Probably some of the costumes being cheesy, like, in the fact, but it fits with it too.
Yeah. I would say that there's very little that falls into the category of this doesn't work. The only thing that I might be willing to actually say doesn't work in this is that the plot is a bit busy. There's a lot going on. Like I said, there's the spy angle that didn't really need to be there. It doesn't really hurt the film. It doesn't. But it didn't need to be there. There's like the side thing with the other doctor on board that was playing chess that I don't really get.
The engineer.
Yeah, the engineer. I don't really understand why he was needed there.
I think he was, like Natasha, he was an instrument character that would intrigue the extraterrestrial to want to take his mind.
Yeah, because he can absorb minds. That's why people's brains went.
That's why he went after. Oh, that's the American, is the companion to the engineer.
Yeah. See, I don't really think there's anything that really falls into that lower category. It does not work. There's things that are like, it's
not
fine.
needed, but it gave it depth.
The
in
thing
a way
that I think most people would be like, oh God, that's awful. But I actually think it's fine. It were the special effects on the creature's eyes, because you can tell they're just like appliances put over the person's eyes to make them glow red.
But you thought
it looked really good in the dark.
In the dark with the,
like, low light, you could still see the outline of the person, and then all of a sudden their eyes start glowing red, and I'm like, ooh, that's actually kind of sinister. It's a little creepy.
The monk, it really looked well on, where on the inspector it didn't work right.
I thought that like the hand, like whenever like the creature was really using his powers,
I didn't understand why the inspector had the grotesque
it's
hand.
because like the body changes a bit when he's using powers. That's why the eyes start glowing and he gets like puffy face or whatever. That's the only reason I can think of. but when it was lit lowly, like, so it wasn't like total shadow, it wasn't total dark. You could still see the outline of the person, some details, and then the eyes would start glowing. You're like, okay, that is good. It's when they were well lit and the eyes would start glowing. You're like, okay, that does not look good.
Not supposed to do that anyway, because the thing that they figured out, and that's why
Doesn't like light.
He can't work it when he's got too much light.
It's vision based, yeah, and like information gets scrambled when there's lots of light around, I guess. And they even mention at one point, should we be looking for radiation or something like that, or
somebody
X-rays?
did.
Yeah, like, okay, that's
because they were looking at the eyes through a magnifying glass.
Yeah, that there were like patterns,
and they
could be in the
even
eyes.
looked into the inspector's eyes when he had the ET.
Can I say that I think this might be a film that you could make today as a period piece? Still set it in 1906 on like the Trans-Siberian Railway. You could make this a terrifying movie, like honest to God terrifying movie, because all the pieces are there. I think this is good. I think I'm recommending this movie. We both do. We've already said that a couple times. If I had to give it out of 10, I would say that this is like a 7. I enjoyed this movie. Am I going to watch it immediately again? No, but I think I would watch it again. I think it's a fun movie. Well, out of your 10,
I'd give it about a 7, 8.
7, 8. So I think it could be made today, made better and more terrifying. I'm not talking about bloody. When people often hear me saying a good scary movie, they're like, oh, a gore film, because that's what a lot of these scary movies are today, quote unquote scary movies. I'm like, no, I don't mean jump scares. I don't mean blood and gore. I don't mean torture porn. I'm talking like an honest to God, like,
the one thing they could have done better
movie
is make the people totally scared of when they go into the thing of don't go without somebody else.
Yeah.
The next scene you see is Saxon by himself.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm actually mentioned that.
Yeah.
You should have amped up the fear in the secondary characters.
Yes. Thinking about it, maybe it shouldn't be remade, because I think maybe you can make a comparison to The Thing in this. Not the original The Thing from Outer Space, but I'm talking about John Carpenter's The Thing. Because it's an isolated movie, you don't know who the killer is. They're just set in a base, so it's still this kind of closed situation, except they're on a train. People are dying. You're having to figure out who the killer is. The killer can basically change shape, so you don't really know who currently the killer is. Anyone could be that person. So it's kind of like John Carpenter's The Thing in that regard. So maybe they did remake this, is they just set it on a base.
There's also that spaceship, that dark. God, I can't think of that in film.
Thinking Event Horizon?
Not Event
No.
Horizon. Was it this? Was that the name of the movie?
I don't know, Darlene. But anyway, we liked this movie. We did. We recommend it. Any final thoughts? I mean, I hadn't seen this before. This is a movie I hadn't seen before. Yeah, it's 1972, so it's slightly outside of our core range. But again, like I said back in episode 100, we're expanding out a little bit to get a little more range in what we're doing. I like finding movies that aren't really well known, let's put it that way, aren't like the classics, and I kind of want to explore some of those horror films. I really want to do some terribly adult Italian horror films from the 70s, just because I do think they influence modern ones, but since they're 1970s, they can be corny. It's just that there's nudity in them, is all. I do want to do some of those because they are weird and
they're
fun.
Close to porn, though.
No, you are talking about a specific one that we ended up watching that one time, and I was like, nope, we're done, because it basically was pornography. But again, different filmmaking
I will
culture.
never forget She-Wolf of the SS.
Also, that wasn't as bad as that one Italian film that we're mentioning. I'm not going to mention the actual name of the film.
I can't. I don't.
It was.
Remember.
Was it well made? Yeah, but it was. I had to shut it off. It was too much. I was like, no, this isn't. If this was in the U.S., this would be sold in certain adult stores. Like, it would not be in
It would be in the porn section.
Yeah, it was wacky. Anyway, we'll leave it there. This was a good movie. This was
I
Horror
recommend
Express.
it
Yeah,
for
we
you to
both
watch
recommend
it. It's up there with our Megaloth monster.
No, I don't think so. I don't think it like what the megal. No. This isn't the Monolith Monsters.
Is it almost there?
No. See, like I would say this is not one of those hidden gems. Like when I say Monolith Monsters is way better than you would think it would be. This Monolith Monsters is like a 9 out of 10, where I was just like clapping all the way through it, like going, "Oh my god, I cannot believe I've never really understood how good this movie is." This is not a 9 out of 10. This is not like War of the Worlds. This is not Time Machine. This is not Monolith Monsters. It's good though.
It's good. It was more than I expected.
It's about what I expected, seeing Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing on the but the difference is that I expected more out of Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing, where I didn't get that from them. I just got it from the overall movie, like the overall part of it, which is
probably
fine.
Was dealing with his grief,
and that's fine. I'm not going to criticize them for that.
It was actually an iconic film that they got him through it.
Yeah, it helped him. So I appreciate the behind the scenes stuff in this as well. So I'm Aaron.
I'm Darlene. Good evening.
And keep watching the skies.
At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
Thanks for listening to this episode of This Week in Geek. Hungry for more? Check out our website at thisweekingeek.net. You can subscribe to the podcast, browse our Twitter and Instagram, and leave your thoughts on today's topics. If you'd like to give us some feedback, send us an email at feedback@thisweekingeek.net. Tune in next time, and remember,
lower your shields and surrender your listenership.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.